I arrived early, always do. That's something no one notices until something breaks and suddenly it matters. The valet nodded as I stepped out, smoothing the hem of my dress. Linen, comfortable, not too formal. Tessa always said she liked me understated. I took her words to heart more than she ever realized. Inside, the maitre d' greeted me with a tight smile. Name, ma'am, Clarabelle Rowe. I'm with the Ramirez party. His fingers danced across the tablet, then paused. I'm afraid there's no one listed under Rowe, ma'am. I tilted my head. It may be under Tessa Ramirez. His face relaxed. Yes. Table for 11. He led me past flickering candles and glass walls to the private room in the back. There they were. Emile, Tessa, her in-laws, a few friends from college. A photographer I recognized from their engagement dinner. 11 names, 11 chairs. Tessa looked up. No surprise in her face, just a little smirk. Oh, I thought you weren't coming. My bad. I glanced at the table. 11 place cards. My name wasn't among them. The maitre d' hovered. Shall I bring another seat? I looked at the empty space at the far corner where they'd clearly shifted things to fit someone else. No need, I said quietly. I stepped forward, pulled the small velvet box from my purse, and placed it on the edge of the table. Silver wrapping turquoise ribbon, Tessa's favorite. A necklace my mother wore every Christmas. Tessa didn't reach for it. She just raised her wine glass and kept talking to the man beside her. I nodded, then turned away. My heels echoed against the tile as I crossed the floor and exited the restaurant. Outside, the air had changed. Crisp, unforgiving. I didn't call a cab. I walked down the avenue past twinkling shop windows and couples laughing over dinner, past the invitation-only warmth I had once built for other people's joy. Behind me, the laughter in that room faded. Ahead of me, the sidewalk opened wide and empty. I walked without looking back. Back in my hotel room, I slipped off my earrings. Tessa never sent a real invitation. Just a message 3 weeks ago, if you're free, swing by casual thing. That's how she put it. Like I was some neighbor who might show up with potato salad. But what I saw tonight wasn't casual. It was choreographed. A curated wine list live string quartet, custom menus tied with twine, and 11 place cards, every one of them deliberate. I changed into my robe and sat on the edge of the bed. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the drawer sachets I always pack. I reached for my laptop more out of habit than purpose. The wine sponsor's logo caught my eye on a tagged photo. I'd seen it before. I clicked through, then the florist. Another familiar name. Then the linen napkins, those belonged to a boutique I'd introduced to Seattle's catering scene years ago. One after another, my old contacts appeared, their brands wrapped neatly into Tessa's glittering evening. My network, my reputation, my relationships. Not one of them had called. Not one had asked, did you approve this? Is this your event? Because it wasn't mine. It just came from me. I stared at the screen for a long moment, fingers hovering over the trackpad. Then I closed the laptop. I stood to pour myself a glass of water, but something stopped me. I returned to the desk, reopened the laptop. My password still worked for most of those vendor portals. I never took my name off the contingency listings. In this business, you learn if they need you once they'll list you forever. I clicked deeper into one of the contracts, then another. Every emergency contact was still me. They hadn't replaced me. They'd erased me and kept the blueprint. The planning software hadn't changed much. Still clean, still efficient. I'd helped develop the early prototypes before selling my stake. They'd kept the bones of it, checklists synced, calendars, contingency trees. But the soul that was always mine. I entered my login. It recognized me instantly. There it was under active bookings, March 19th. Maison Salix Private Dinner, T. Ramirez. I clicked. The profile opened in layers. Guest list confirmed. Menu pre-approved. Timeline locked. Every moving piece tracked in real time. Under emergency contact, the name glowed against the gray background. Clarabelle Rowe, Senior Contingency Advisor. I hadn't removed myself after retiring. I didn't think I needed to. It was just a backup in case something went wrong. The kind of invisible thread that holds everything together. The kind no one notices until it's pulled. They'd used that thread. Used me. The venue confirmation came from my credentials. The catering deposit, too. Even the florist marked me as fallback authorization. I recognized the signatures. The little shorthand notes they used to trust without question. My name present everywhere. Except the invitation. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I wasn't surprised either. What I felt was something colder. Something that no longer burned. Something still and sharp. I clicked Download Event Summary. The document populated line by line vendor agreements, delivery times, coordinator access, fail-safe instructions. I printed it onto the hotel's letterhead, watching each page slide out. 12 pages. One for every place setting. I stapled them together, then wrote a single sentence at the bottom. My handwriting hadn't changed in decades. I used a pen I kept in my purse, thin blue ink, soft gliding. No threats, no performance. Just a statement of control. I folded the document in thirds and placed it inside the velvet box where the necklace had rested hours ago. I no longer needed to offer anything that sparkled. I had something far more valuable. Authority. I have spent most of my life smoothing edges, rewording, rephrasing, softening truths, so events would stay on track, so people could shine, so no one ever sensed the tremor under the surface. But clarity has a language of its own. It doesn't need flourishes. It just needs direction. I opened a blank document on the hotel computer and typed the first line, counting the words as I spoke them silently in my head. To the caterer, please cancel March 19th service. Authorization, emergency contact. Clean, direct, unmistakable. The second came even easier. To the band event, canceled by verified contact. Please confirm receipt. The third one needed the least shaping. To the venue, formal termination of coordination rights. I printed each on a separate sheet. No letterheads, no pleasantries, just instruction. The business center's fax machine sat humming in the corner, an older model with a smudged keypad and a tray that rattled faintly when I touched it. I fed the first page in, typed the number I still knew from memory, and pressed send. The confirmation page slid out a moment later, warm at the edges. The staff didn't glance up. They were used to people handling work at odd hours, used to quiet urgency that didn't demand attention. I moved through the motions smoothly. Fax, confirm, staple. Fax, confirm, staple. Each action carved into muscle memory from a lifetime of backstage crises. By the time the third confirmation printed, I had a neat trio of documents, each stamped, each binding, each final. I placed them inside a slim folder and tucked it into my purse. My hands stayed steady, as if they'd been waiting years to do exactly this. This wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It felt more like adjusting a painting that had hung crooked for too long, an act of restoring balance, nothing more. They seated her under the hanging lights right in the center, where the gold-dipped menus fanned across the table like trophies. I wasn't there to see it, but I could picture it all. Maison Salix didn't change much. Same over-polished service, same tendency to run the spotlight a beat too long. At 7:30, the first thing went wrong. The wine hadn't arrived. No welcome glass. No cork popping in the background. A server explained that the sommelier had a family emergency. No replacement was sent. A younger waiter was handed the wine list, and he scanned it like it was written in code. Tessa frowned. By 7:45, the jazz trio took their places, nodded once, and played a single number. Then, without a word, they packed their instruments, rolled up the cables, and exited out the side like stagehands at a canceled play. Guests exchanged looks. One woman whispered behind her napkin. Another checked her phone. Tessa's smile stretched thinner. Her voice dropped lower, clipped tight. "Where's the coordinator?" she asked the waiter. He looked confused. "We weren't given one tonight. It's self-managed." She stared at him, then down at her gold-rimmed plate. No one came to greet her. No one walked her through the timeline. There was no clipboard, no fallback phone number, no Clarabelle. She didn't know yet that 3 messages had gone out. Didn't know the florist never confirmed. That the cake was never delivered. That every moving piece had been silenced with less than 10 words. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to be in the room. At 7:53 p.m., as the first guest excused herself early and the second sipped from an empty glass, I was already halfway across the state line. The train hummed steadily beneath me. I sipped the tea the porter brought and opened my book to page 1. I'd read it many times before, but that night, the silence between chapters felt different. The post went up at midnight. Just a photo, dim lighting half-cleared plates, an awkward smile from someone seated too far from the center. The caption read, "Most awkward birthday I've ever attended." Was this supposed to be high-end? By morning, it had quietly made its way across timelines. Comments trickled in from people I didn't know, but recognized the tone of. "No music," one said. Yikes. Another added, "When the wine's late, the party's doomed." Someone even tagged the venue. "What happened, Maison Salix?" At the bottom of the thread, a familiar florist replied with a simple emoji, neutral, unsmiling. That was her way of stepping back without saying it aloud. I had trained her to avoid drama, but speak when needed. She remembered. By 10 a.m., 2 boutique sponsors quietly untagged themselves from Tessa's birthday photos. A third deleted the post entirely. The chef had made a pistachio sponge with fig jam and custard. I'd seen the draft menu weeks ago when the supplier sent over samples, still using my reference code for billing. But without confirmation and out of respect, he withheld the final cake, placed it back into the chillers, said nothing. The wine distributor reversed the invoice. Unopened boxes were picked up at 9:15. No drama, no accusation. Just a line in the delivery notes, client failed to confirm authorization. Meanwhile, I poured my coffee slowly. My phone pinged with the link. An old colleague sent it, no message needed. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the night had folded in on itself. I clicked the photo, once saw the candlelit mess frozen mid-failure, then closed it. Folded my napkin. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like physics. They had pulled me out but kept the scaffolding I built. And then they were surprised when the roof sagged. I placed the napkin on the tray and reached for the mail. On top was an envelope, familiar handwriting, too delicate, trying too hard to be sweet. The envelope was pale yellow and smelled faintly of artificial rose. Tessa's handwriting on the front, neat, rounded like she used to write on her science fair posters. I opened it at the kitchen counter with no real expectation. Inside was a card, covered in pastel flowers, gold lettering across the top. Just a note. I opened it slowly, half expecting a folded letter, something with weight. Instead, a thin gift card slid out $10 to a coffee shop chain I never visit. The kind near office buildings, not neighborhoods. The handwritten message inside. "Thanks for dropping by. Hope it wasn't too much trouble." No mention of the folding chair. No mention of the missing sommelier, the vanished musicians, or the awkward silence that had settled like fog over her candlelit table. No mention of the sponsors who pulled out, or the cake that never arrived. Just, "Thanks for dropping by," as if I had wandered in off the street. I stared at the words for a while, turning the card in my hand. The back still had the price sticker. There was no apology. Not even a trace of acknowledgement. It was almost worse than if she'd said something cruel. This was polite dismissal, dressed as gratitude. I walked over to the fridge, peeled back the corner of an old recipe clipping, and stuck the card beneath a ceramic magnet shaped like a tiny chalkboard. It said, proof. Not decoration, not memory. Proof of how small they thought I'd become. Proof that their version of kindness came pre-measured and laminated. I didn't tear the card up. I didn't throw it away. Sometimes you need to keep the evidence exactly where you can see it, so you never let yourself forget again. I turned from the fridge and walked to my desk, pulling open the drawer with my estate documents. It was time. The folder was thicker than I remembered. Tucked at the back of my desk drawer behind old tax records and curled sticky notes was the one marked Roe Legacy Fund. I hadn't touched it since after Marvin's passing. We'd set it up as a loose plan, one of those someday projects we talked about over coffee before hospital visits became our calendar. Inside were the account statements, notarized forms, and a letter Marvin had written in his neat architect's script. Let this go to something that lasts. You always knew how to build things better than I did. I exhaled slowly and turned to my laptop. The estate's remaining balance had grown more than I expected. $312,000 sitting still, waiting for purpose. It wasn't going to a child who sent coffee cards in place of apologies. I clicked through the foundation portal. Created a new entity, Roe Second Table Fund. Mission to provide hospitality scholarships and mentorship for adults over 50 people who had been overlooked, undervalued, or told it was too late. I wrote the bylaws myself, then drafted the list of board members. 5 chairs, all women, all with stories like mine. Claudette, who used to run a roadside diner before her husband emptied the accounts. Mina, who baked through 3 chemo rounds and now taught pastry skills to inmates. The others I'd call next week. They'd answer. They always did. I left the final line on the form blank. It didn't say Tessa Rowe. It didn't say anything. Not because I deleted her. I simply never wrote her in. The screen asked for my signature. I signed. The bank emailed confirmation. I filed it. And then I leaned back in my chair and stared at the empty page where her name might have gone once. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was building something where every seat had meaning, and this time no one would forget who set the table. They opened the doors right at noon. Not with a big announcement or a velvet rope, just a soft creak and the smell of roasted squash and warm bread. I stepped into the dining hall and paused. The sun filtered through the tall windows like it used to in my first kitchen years before Tessa was born. A long table stretched down the room, nothing uniform about it. Mismatched chairs, some wooden, some metal one, that looked like it came straight out of a school cafeteria. But it worked. They'd made it work. Linen napkins folded by hand, menus handwritten in careful block print, small vases of herbs instead of centerpieces. It didn't scream money, it whispered intention. I walked slowly, not wanting to blink too fast. There were 12 place settings. One had my name. A band of linen rested across the chair at the head of the table. My name stitched into it in blue thread, Ms. Clarabelle. I touched it gently and sat down. The apprentices stood near the kitchen doors, nerves and pride shining in equal measure. Some I'd met through interviews. Others had only known me by name until today. The starter arrived sweet corn soup in shallow bowls garnished with something green and crisp. No music, no cameras, just the quiet anticipation of a room that understood presence. The head apprentice, her name was Kendra, lifted her glass. She didn't toast to the foundation or to funding. She said, "To the woman who taught us elegance means inclusion." I didn't respond. I couldn't just yet. I reached for my own glass. My hand was steady. Around the table, forks touched plates. Laughter came softly. No one talked over me. No one left me off the list. The chair didn't fold. It was solid. It waited for me, and when I looked down the table at faces eager and unafraid, I realized this was the lunch I never thought I'd have. This was the room I built without apology, and I was just in time for the main course. After the luncheon ended, the apprentices drifted out in twos and threes, still talking about sauces and plating their voices carrying softly down the hall. Someone laughed an easy, unguarded sound, and then the kitchen door swung shut, leaving the room warm with the last traces of their energy. I stayed where I was for a moment, fingers lightly pressed against the linen band on my chair. The fabric still held a faint imprint from when I stood earlier to thank them. Across the table, every other chair had been tucked in neatly napkins, folded plates cleared. Only mine remained untouched. They had cleaned everything but the place I'd occupied. I stood, walked slowly toward the windows, and took in the view. Afternoon light spilled across the floor, catching the dust motes like floating threads. The air held the scent of roasted vegetables, thyme, and something sweet lingering from dessert. No music, no forced celebration, just the quiet of a room that had been used well. I turned back to the table. The chair waited. Not as a courtesy, not as an afterthought. Not because someone needed to fill a space. It waited because they left it for me. Because I belonged in it. I walked over and sat again, letting the wood settle under my weight. No pressure to move. No deadline. Nothing to tolerate or swallow. The silence felt earned, not imposed. I closed my eyes. Not from exhaustion. From fullness. For years, I'd chased a seat at a table that kept shrinking around me. Each event, each holiday, each carefully prepared gift had been another attempt to fit into a space someone else decided I didn't need. But here, this chair, this table, none of it required permission. I hadn't been offered a place. I had built one. I opened my eyes slowly, letting the stillness settle deeper, and rested my hands on the arms of the chair, as though anchoring myself to a truth I finally recognized.